it might take 10-12 minutes on each, if you agree. But I'll start by sharing with you the locality you are in, because Anurag and I both feel South Asia must start at the local. Right now, South Asia is starting at the top, and all of us in activism are also driven by South Asia as defined from the top. So, PeoplesSAARC is a proper term, but I think even PeoplesSAARC works by the SAARC definition of South Asia, which is 8 countries. And we must try to take it to a different level, while not threatening the nation states, but taking it to a level, and that is probably where our experience comes. So let me start right from the local. The place you're in is known as Yala Maya Kendra. Yala is a name for the old ancient name for Patan. Kathmandu Valley has 3 towns: Patan, Kathmandu and Bhaktapur. Each of these have the original indigenous name of the Newar, then the Parvatiya or Nepali name of the whole country, then the Sanskrit name, each of them. So, Patan is the Nepali name, meaning the Khas Kura, the name that goes back to the Nepali language, which also has linkages across the border in Kumaon, Garhwal, etc. Some of you from the Uttarakhand area, you know the term Khas as well. Yeah. So, Yala is Newar, indigenous. Patan is Nepali, and Lalitpur is the Sanskrit. Kathmandu, Kashtab Mandap, Sanskrit. Kathmandu, Nepali, and Yen is the Newari origin. Likewise, Bhaktapur, some of you may have visited. Bhaktapur is Sanskrit, Bhatgaon is Nepali, and Khopa is the indigenous Newar. So all 3 former kingdoms have their own origins. I want to start with this because we're in Kathmandu. I wrote an article last Friday, 6 days ago, in the Kathmandu Post, titled "The Begum of South Asia." The reason I wrote that article was to try and link the parochial people of Kathmandu. All of us are parochials, all of us are inclusive, and all of us are now mostly thinking of ourselves, because we, on the one hand, we want to promote our media, but when we promote our media, we become insular. So we don't read Indian newspapers, we don't need Bangladeshi newspapers, we don't know what's going on in Pakistan. Today we can't understand why is Nawaz Sharif acting so he's got a scowl in his face, he's not signing on those papers, and because we don't know enough about Pakistani politics, we blame it on Nawaz Sharif. So what that means is there is an insularity here. In Nepal also there is an insularity. Dinesh Tripathi, our very courageous fighter, lawyer, advocate and fighter of human rights. So, what was I trying to say? That South Asian understandings should start with the local. Give you an example of Nepal. In Nepal, next to our clock tower, there is the mazar of a Begum. That's the mazar of Begum Hazrat Mahal. Hazrat Mahal was the Begum of Awadh. When Nawaz Wajid Ali Shah was exiled, she became, and she was the fighter of the first war of independence of India. She fled to Kathmandu and she was buried here after living here for 20 years. But we don't know enough about her to be connected to the greater South Asian history. Likewise, Kathmandu had lots of links with South Asia. The main deity of Patan town, this town, came from Kamrup. Right? Machendranath or Bungdeo is the local name. Machendranath is from the Gorakhnath sect. The god is said to have come from Kamrup. The Mool Bhatta, the main pujari of Pashupatinath, is from Kerala. And the local name for soldier is Tilanga, from Telangana. Because this valley was so rich that when they needed soldiers, they imported soldiers. Where did they import soldiers from? They imported them from Telangana. But instead now we have this incipient and lightweight nationalism, where we don't understand the depth of Kathmandu's links to South Asia. So we think of Pashupatinath, oh, we should have a Nepali Bhatta. Forgetting that that is not an Indian Bhatta. He was assigned by the Adi Sankaracharya 400 years ago, that line, the Namudri Brahmins. So that actually should be giving us pride that we had links in our history all the way to the south of the peninsula. Instead we think of a lightweight nationalism, which also then pervades even something as simple as the definition, how to see Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha. First thing is, Buddha was born in Nepal. We don't go to the next layer of what is the Buddha's message. So we make it as a nationalistic icon rather than a place of spirituality. So if we cannot understand the depth of what Lumbini means to the world, then we can hardly utilize it even for socio-economic purpose and tourism and pilgrimages. So this is the background in which the one idea that we have in Himal that we have developed is South Asia must be understood from the local onwards. And why has the South Asian project not proceeded with success? Is because the language of South Asia unfortunately is English. But we must take it to the vernacular. Bangladesh and Nepal are the only two countries where South Asianness is discussed in Bangla and in Nepali. We must be promoting the idea of South Asia in Tamil, in Malayali, in Punjabi, but that is not happening enough. That is another aspect we'd like to share. On the whole, what we feel is that South Asia, even in the forum of activists and Rotarians and engineers and architects, when they meet, they always meet as the Indian architect, the Bangladeshi architect, the Pakistani architect. The only way to break that is to begin with by, even on a metaphorical sense, to say the architect from Karachi, the sociologist from Bangalore, and the activist from Dhaka. At least that way we try to go beyond the definition. The asymmetry of South Asia has never been tackled. We feel that the social scientists have to really study, including when we do, let us say, a Hangout South Asia, or any activism that we are, why has it nothing sparked? It could be that we are all locked into our nationalisms even despite ourselves. And in each of our countries we are probably fighting out the ultra-nationalism within it. So we don't have the time to think South Asian, so we'll talk, oh, but we all should get together. But whatever happens, it is not dynamic, it does not spark. I feel there is something missing in understanding in the non-state sphere, understanding South Asia. Because we are locked into saying, okay, now let us call 2 Pakistanis and 4 Indians and 2 Sri Lankans whenever we do a meeting. But we firstly have to confront the asymmetry of South Asia, where India is 80% of South Asia by population, or probably a little bit, less or more. And the size of the economy, the military prowess, the nature of the Indian state is a reality. So yesterday Modi Sahab made a very significant announcement which could potentially impact the very organization of SAARC. He said, if everybody can't go together, some of us will go together. Which in a way is something that Himal has been propagating, but not to the exclusion of any country. All we have been saying is, you have to call something as a South Asian activity if it is Bangladesh, Nepal and India also. That is the proactive way to look at it. But the negative way to look at it was to say, well, if you want to come along with it, then we'll just exclude you. So somewhere in between is the reality. But let us say, if India were to say, okay, if you can't work with Pakistan, we'll work with Bangladesh, we'll work with Nepal. That is good, because in a way, the cumulative nature of South Asian interactions will make a South Asia also. But there is one fly in the ointment. India, because it borders, except for Afghanistan, all the other countries of South Asia, may easily say, I'll work with you. But what if Nepal wants to contact Bangladesh?
Or Pakistan.
Okay. Exactly. India should be willing, if India wants to propose bilateralisms and the cumulative product of all the bilateralisms to be South Asia, which is my personal view, then it is not enough for Nepal to have a trade agreement and easy passage of goods with India. I should also be allowed that with ease with Pakistan, and India must facilitate that with eyes closed. Or if I want to, I am also affiliated to a bus company, so tomorrow I will easily be able to run a bus route from Kathmandu to Benares. No, hang on. I'm not to. I'm coming to that. That's the point I'm making. I can go to Banaras, Kashi Vishwanath to Pashupatinath, no problem. But if I want to take my bus to Dhaka, then India has to provide not for the Nepali but for the Indian dual entry visa. For the Bangladeshi dual entry visa. Otherwise, the Bangladeshi cannot come to Kathmandu and go back. Now, this is where I'm saying the Modi prescription, which has not yet made the media in a big form. But to me, he's made an earth-shaking announcement. But we must make sure that that announcement works the way for South Asian regionalism and not bilateralism of India. Which is, India-Nepal bilateralism is fine, but India, Pakistan or India, Bangladesh bilateralism also should be allowed. Then for me that becomes South Asian bilateralism. Because right now we are locked in South Asia because the other extreme of Modi's announcement is all 8 countries have to agree on something. And that is impossible. You get the lowest common denominator. For example, Nepal had made a proposal in this SAARC summit on migration. Job migration to the Gulf and Malaysia, how to provide protection. For the Bhutanese, Maldives and Afghanistan, that is not relevant. For all the other countries it is relevant, but according to the rules of SAARC, that cannot be adopted unless Afghanistan, Bhutan and Maldives say, okay, we'll let you do it. We are part of the consensus. And there, Nepal's lack of preparation showed through. So in the next 2 years, everybody in Kathmandu, and many people in Kathmandu seem to think that the SAARC ends with this summit. Tonight, Modi Saab leaves. Tomorrow, Nawaz Sharif leaves early in the morning because he wants to see the mountain view. And then a few others, and by day after, everybody will be gone. And that is when Nepal will say, well, SAARC is over. No, SAARC is with Nepal as chairman for the next 2 years. Because I don't think there will be another summit for the next 2 years. And Pakistan is the next host. So one can expect, because of India-Pakistan relationships, right now, suddenly out of the blue, Modi was he's such a media person. He knows when the camera is looking at him and when Nawaz Sharif is going behind him. At that very moment, he picks up the SAARC booklet, very badly designed one by the Nepali government, and he starts looking at it. He knows when the camera is on. And that was a direct message sent. So I think the SAARC summit might take at least 2 years. These 2 years are when Nepal should get active. Whereas our tendency is to think that the summit is over and then that's that. No, I think we must work on that. So this is my very scattered sense
on how to work out our collective attitudes towards China.
Okay. Okay. Firstly, how to work out our attitude towards each other, right? In South Asia, I try to suggest to you that one, we must start local. The reason the anti-nuclear activism has not worked is it never breached the vernacular barrier except in West Bengal, nowhere else. So it doesn't become political. What we must do is we must make SAARC a political agenda, so that the politicians are right now they can just forget about it except for the summits. And in summit you use it for your purpose. Everybody was using it for purpose, not only Modi. Nawaz Sharif was using it because he wanted to be bland, because his local politics does not allow him to say anything. The army and Imran Khan doesn't allow him to say anything. So he was playing politics by making. I did 12 tweets on Modi and 2 on Nawaz Sharif. There was nothing there, but that was deliberate. He was responding to his particular situation. We have to be empathetic towards him. Except for the Nepal, which as a host had to be nice, but didn't use the speech for any agenda, which I think was also foolish. Everybody else used it for their individual agendas, right? So I think on South Asia, I'll end that and then I'll respond to your point. We must think of ways in which we can make the South Asian idea political. I think we have not succeeded in it. All of us, including those gathered in People's SAARC, and some good people who are very much part of the state establishment, in the bureaucracies, in the diplomatic community, and even in politics, somehow we are lacking the tools to recognize the historical continuities of South Asia within the individual nation states of South Asia. One formula that I have suggested is to have many formulas, which is South Asia cannot be looked at only with the prism of the nation state, but that is also useful because it has buy-in of the state. But one way would be to promote more energies in the state or province level. so that we start promoting in Rajasthan a demand that Rajasthan should be interacting with Sindh. We promote a demand in Nepal that while our sovereignty is intact, we must not always be running to Delhi. We must also be able to challenge and talk and work with Patna, with Lucknow. We don't even look at Lucknow and Patna these days. So we must. There also, and in the north with the Darjeeling sector, or in the west with full Uttarakhand, because there's a Pancheshwar Dam coming up.
Yes.
It is time for the activists on the two sides to exchange notes. But Kathmandu will, even the activists in Kathmandu will look at Delhi. And at most they will go to the Center for Science and Environment. They will not go up to Almora. So I feel that this is one way. It may be tough, it may look like it will take a long time, but we must politicize South Asianness, which means then you don't have to think of, well, if I am a South Asia activist in Uttarakhand, I don't always have to think about Chittagong. I have to be sensitive about Chittagong hill tracts, but I'm working here. But I need to be sensitive about Balochistan as well. But my working area is here, and this is a South Asian activity. If it is bilateral or trilateral, it is South Asian. That is the way we could go ahead. And the other is, I think, just at a formal level, at the academic level, there must be more fashionableness in studying South Asia. South Asia, for a long time, has been kept in the back burner by the scholarship. And sometimes I would like to say that whenever, I don't mean all people, but by and large, for the first 2 decades of SARC, a lot of deadwood got attracted to SARC. Because, meaning intellectualism, because in those who couldn't sell themselves in the vibrant arena of national politics and geopolitics of Asia, they diverted themselves to South Asia because there was funding, but you did not have to use your grey cells too much. I think we must also then, therefore, go beyond that, and that's where I think this meeting is so important, for us to be able to share our feelings about, and I've done it in a very scattered way. If Anand had spoken, she would have spoken step by step and deliberately. But I hope that my scatteredness also reflects the scatteredness of South Asia. You cannot speak of it in one linear fashion. Still, Anand would have been a more composed presenter. I will answer your question now. About China. There's an attempt, a suggestion that China be made right now a member of SARC. I think that's a non-flyer, so why even push something that will never fly? To begin with, at the conceptual level, you could say South Asia and China are other entities that should be working with each other. Because China as a civilization entity, even though there is a problem with the word civilization, what is the counterpart to that in Southern Asia? It is South Asia as a whole. Not India, the nation state created in 1947. So, at a very base level of theory, you could say, and we even Himal have done 2 issues on China and South Asia, looking at the issues in terms of the interaction between these civilizational forces. So to that extent, South Asia as a whole must work with China, must be open to understanding what's happening in China, and intellectuals and activists must have a view in what's happening within China, within mainland China, within Xinjiang, within Tibet, because there is a hear no evil, see no evil attitude towards China, particularly in Kathmandu, where we have to balance India and China. And because India is so overwhelming in our economy and society, that we have to counterbalance India by privileging China more than we should. And as a result, Chinese are coming and breathing down very hard on our necks, and we need not accept all of that, but we do. So we sort of are like a football between India and China, and because of our own weaknesses. My own view about China, therefore, is that China can be an economic force for good. All over Nepal today, young children dress warm because of cheap Chinese clothing. Never have Nepali children in the hills in particular, and during the Sheet Lahar in the plains as well, been as warmly dressed. So let us understand the value of China. China is also now bringing a train all the way to the Nepal border, close to the Nepal border point. It has already arrived in 2006 in Lhasa, and this year it arrived in Shigatse. Shigatse is north of Bhutan and Darjeeling, and it's moving westward at quite a clip. There will be a change in economy. The Himalaya is no longer a barrier. Already as we speak, the north-south roads in Nepal are being metalled, and before long you can actually go from the northwest of Kathmandu. If the road is widened slightly more, you can be from the Tibetan plateau to the Indo-Gangetic plains in 5.5 hours. Whereas it's inconceivable. Even 10 years ago we think that. So the whole region is going to be changing. Railroads will bring a different kind of economy, and the population of Tibet certainly is changing to be more and more hand-dominated. So we have to be alert to all of these rather than just think, oh, there is Beijing and there is Delhi and we are in between. And as far as SARC is concerned, amidst all this, there is this suggestion, and Nawaz Sharif repeated it yesterday, that China should be made a part of...
Along with Korea.
Along with Korea, yeah. I don't see how it works. You know, at a conceptual level, there is South Asia, there is East Asia, there is Southeast Asia. So if you open up the Pandora's box, you can even say, why can't Colombia be a member of SARC? Right? or because South Africa, South Asia, same, so let's take South Asia, South Africa, right? So I think it's a non-starter. It's even a school boy or school girl can say, but on the other hand, you can have collaborations. You can have very dynamic collaboration that may even be more important than SARC. So I feel it is just something said, like for the heck of it, just because you don't have anything substantial to say. But on the other hand, it catches the imagine. There are 2 articles in today's newspaper in Nepal. The importance of bringing SARC as a member. China into SARC. I say, bas karo is what you should say on this one, because without at all being skeptical about China. This is how much China behind the scenes influences us. That we will say, well, if we say no, China should not be, then China will get angry. So we will say China should be a member of SARC, but not do anything about it. That is the attitude at least in Nepal, I think. You know, if somebody asks a Nepali politician, so what do you think about China joining SARC? He suddenly get all scared because Nepal's overall survival apparently depends on being nice to China. If I say China should not be a member of SARC, then what will China think? So we say, hona chahiye. But then you forget about it. This is that. This is my answer to the China thing. Nepal, I've talked too long, so I'll be very brief. Nepal is a country that had, although my brief might be a little long. I'm sorry. Right? Alright, what do I do? Would you like to add a few things on the South Asian element? You may want to correct me or add to what I have said, okay? Because by now we are supposed to be talking jointly.
No, please.
On Nepal, firstly, a bit of historical background. Nepal is the oldest nation state in South Asia. But nation building is just beginning. Nation state because 245 or odd years ago, Prithvi Narayan Shah unified Nepal. He unified it through subjugation, through diplomatic skill, and through subterfuge and violence. He did everything. He even married into various, at least 2 clans to get those districts over. So that is the history of Nepal. Of course.
Flight at 11.
That flight is important.
Yeah. No, we just organize a taxi and all.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I'll try to join you.
I'm sorry I spoke too long.
No. Hey, OS, you see, I'll arrange.
मतलब टैक्सी के बाद ये बाहर आएगा.
हाँ, taxi के बाद.
अच्छा.
I'll call you.
Taxi is right outside. Just tell the guard. So on Nepal, oldest nation state, but nation building just beginning. But the people have been impoverished through historical time because right after our unification, and I will use the word unification because in current Nepali context, in our polarized state, even the term unification is challenged because it is subjugation. But in a way, you know, I use it in a normal way because Nepal remains unified today because it was unified from about 55, 60 odd principalities into one. Now, the fortune of being a unified nation state with lots of resources has never accrued to the people of Nepal till today. In quick historical succession, what happened? The people of Nepal, the peasantry, have been made poor throughout. Firstly, right after the unification, the descendant of Prithvinarayan started predatory invasive wars into Kumaon Garhwal with an eye as far as past the Satluj all the way to Kashmir. Tried to have collaboration with Ranjit Singh of Punjab. That's one. So that taxed the people. The Gorkhalis are not well remembered in Kumaon Garhwal either. But more than that, it impoverished the people of Nepal. Then in the 1840s, the Rana regime took over, which was a oligarchy, a family oligarchy that ruled this country for 105 years till 1950. During that time, Nepal was made nominally independent by the British because the British didn't want to run these cantankerous hill states. So the Rana family was allowed to run it in the name of the king or the royalty, with the blessings of the British, saying, "Tum apne kaam karo, jo kuch karo, lekin humko tang mat karo." So that way Nepal became nominally independent. But this one family amassed income to the level of British royalty here in Kathmandu. And this is a to give you a sense of how they amassed wealth. This was a cowshed. To have a cowshed this well built indicates sponging off the people of Nepal. This is what this was. This was the cowshed. Okay. So then 1950 we entered, by 1960 we had ended an autocratic regime of the Panchayat. So the king ruled, and the king did not allow representative politics to sink in. And this comes close now to the era when he began to look at Nepal and be supportive of our democracy. In the 80s, Nepal was still an autocratic country which could not take advantage of the fact that Nepal, in the modern era, we had everything: hydropower, possibilities of agroforestry, possibilities of tourism, possibilities of service industries, and possibilities of great economic advance along the Tarai. Because the Tarai is like a clothes hanger of the most populated region in the world in terms of density. From Uttar Pradesh, Western UP to West Bengal, including Bihar and Purvanchal. This is like a
Himachal also.
Himachal also. Well, it doesn't touch, but it doesn't touch. Yeah, and then you go up the hills. You got the Darjeeling hills and Sikkim, and then on the side you got Uttarakhand, right? All of this, but I emphasize the plains where the density of population is such. You could have an industrial corridor along the Tarai. But what happened? Because we did not have representative politics, we had a rent-seeking elite in Kathmandu that developed further, but the people could not take advantage of even modern era and the era of democracy, where democratic innovations and self-corrections would have taken us back. So for 30 years of our modern era, from 50 to 1990, we got locked away. Then we got democracy. The idea of more parliamentary democracy was that you begin to experiment with it. You have lots of polarization, but on the whole, you will sort of find your way. But within 5 years of Nepal, for the first time since time became democratic in 1990. Except for 1 year and 9 months under BP Koirala's prime ministership in 59-60. So if you discount that, Nepal became democratic only in 1990. That was the time then you begin to start to work on the marginalizations, the caste issues, the Dalit versus upper caste, then you have the ethnicities versus the Brahmin, Kshatri, lockhold on our state, then the Madhesis versus vis-a-vis the hill people, the national identity, etc. That is when the very messy instrument of parliamentary democracy and local government leading to national level parliament would have worked with these things. But came a very opportunistic force known as the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist, made up of people who were very ambitious, who wanted to use the philosophy espoused by Mao. By that time, Nepal was a country with lots of 16-year-olds with school leaving certificate education, and hence politicized, but not the skills to find a job. You could romanticize them very easily, and this, now I'll come to my point of view. Till now what I have said may be considered a kind of a history. Now I can only share with you something, and with caveat emptor, that this is my view that I'm going to say for the next five minutes and I'll end. It is that Nepal was not ready in 1996. Nepali society was not so deep in despair with the historical forces squeezing the possibilities out of the people of Nepal, that there was a need for a people's war, quote unquote, where one party decides that it can agitate and even kill for a purpose. And Nepal became good for insurgency because our terrain is a mix of Afghanistan's ravines and Vietnam's undergrowth. Perfect. And the state wasn't everywhere. I think we'll have to let you go, right? Thanks, Ethan.
After 5 minutes.
Okay. So Nepal was ideal terrain for various reasons for insurgency. One is our terrain, number one. Number two, we had a democratic government. There's a great kind of propaganda all over the world and especially in India that the Maoists rose up to fight the royal regime. No, Nepal had a parliamentary democracy, an imperfect democracy. But that is the other point, because this parliamentary democracy, just coming into the philosophy of democratic governance, did not come down harshly upon an insurgency force that was challenging the state. 2. 3. The network of highways was very poor. As a result, the police couldn't go anywhere where there was an insurgent action. 2. Then 3. You could actually, if you brutalized one individual in a remote valley, you could control 100,000 people. And there was a lot of brutalizations. All of this, and finally the fact that the army was not employed right in the beginning when the dangers became evident, because the civilian government may have even wanted to. Firstly, I think it was reluctant to because it had democratic values, which the insurgents certainly didn't. Secondly, the king controlled the army, right? As a result, for all these reasons, the Maoists took off, and the world sees them as a force that was fighting marginalization and historical subjugation, to which I agree. But what it did extra, which is what has taken us on an 18-year derailment of our society, is insurgency that was not required except for the ambition of certain individuals who went on to become prime ministers in the plural, right? And this, I will end here by saying that this is my perspective. It is not something that needs to be accepted by everyone, but I say this because the overall discourse does not carry this view too much. What we must look for is, for me personally, a social democratic Nepal, where we have a republic, but that republic must be democratic. If a republic is not democratic, then there is no sense in having.
Everybody knows from
We met earlier.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
Side.
yeah, goodbye. Goodbye. Yes, yes. We'll have from Karachi. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. So, this is where I end by saying that the peace process in Nepal was very important. Some people will ask, so but why did you agree then for the talks with the Maoists? Of course I would. There is no contradiction in disagreeing with the Maoist agenda, yet wanting to talk with the Maoists to bring them into the open society, because they were on the wrong foot to begin with. And now, because there is so much mayhem, in 2005, the so-called peace process began in 2006. In 2005, 8 Nepalis were dying every day, civilians, in violent deaths. That was too much for our society to bear. So it was important to reach out. At that time, even the Indian government then helped with facilitating, the Indian state helped, and we were able to emerge. What happened thereafter is something that will be very interesting for you, because that brings us to contemporary time. The peace process began, but the peace process suddenly saw two kinds of encroachments. One is the donor and the United Nations. One is the Indian intelligence. There were other intelligence active, but Indian intelligence was proactive. So what has happened? What happened therefore was something known as the UNMIN, United Nations Mission in Nepal. became a very politicized agency that became a political agency that was supposed to chaperone our peace process. And what it did was, because of a romanticized feeling about the Maoists, they privileged the Maoists vis-a-vis the Democratic Party. So the UML and Congress, who were already decimated in the villages because the Maoists threatened them, so all their local leaders moved out of the villages. So there was a political vacuum, a democratic vacuum in the villages. So the political parties were already weakened from the inside, and then the outside interpretation of Nepal's peace process, which is the one that is dominant even today in the think tanks in New Delhi, as well as the United Nations and elsewhere, is that the peace process, they didn't allow the Nepali actors the freedom for two reasons. One is the political interpretation put by Ian Martin, who had led the UNMIN process. His reports to the Security Council was the ones, and if you read them, you will find them prejudiced against democratic forces and overly clawing towards the Maoists. All the embassies in Nepal, and they have a lot of clout. Unlike every other country, even Bangladesh, in Nepal, the Western embassy, the donor embassy, with whom I function all the time. I also, when you need money in Nepal, you don't have local philanthropists, local goodies, local foundations, you go to the donor. But the donors are so decisive in Nepal because they can create the discourse. So the money that the donors gave went to reify or to consolidate the UN view on Nepal's peace process. So as a result, the world, the donor, the Indian intelligence, and all of them saw Nepal as where the Maoists had done this great act of coming above ground. Even they were very magnanimous, whereas the reality was that they were collapsing when they took advantage of the peace process. And nobody watched when the Maoists cheated on the peace process. As a result, we spent 8 years towards normalization. To me, the normalization begins more or less with November 2013, not the election of 2008, which was done under a vitiated atmosphere, where one side still had guns in the cantonments, and we went into elections. We were fools, but as I said, if I may be able to blame the world, but in the end, I will end by blaming ourselves. The civil society in Nepal, which didn't have an intellectual base, which didn't have an ability to stand up and respond, didn't have the ability of English to counter point of view by the all-powerful diplomats, and could not stand up to Indian intelligence when it started playing games within Nepal. So, while I may blame a lot of other people, point a finger at many other people, I will end by saying that Nepal has been messed up because of the Kathmandu Valley intelligentsia, of which I am part, and that is how I end my presentation. Thank you.
Can we request Ms. Mazumdar to make her observation and then Professor Obdedi?
Well, Kanak is a South Asianist. I'm just confined to being a South Asian journalist, and I'm certainly not part of the Kathmandu Valley